In all likelihood, Russia will retaliate by targeting British diplomats working in Moscow. Let's bring in Ed Turzanski. He's a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute and a former U.S. intelligence officer. Ed, always good to have you with us. What do you make of what we're seeing?
Well, Vladimir Putin is running for office in Russia. He has done this before on British soil and in neighboring countries. And the British were remarkably precise and I think very patient in the way they went about this. First, they said to the Russians, they didn't accuse them of doing it. They wanted to know how Russia had lost control of its nerve agent. This is a very specific Russian-produced nerve agent that was used. And Putin has acted with impunity when it comes to poisoning political opponents outside of his country. This time, not only was a former spy and his daughter poisoned, but also other British subjects were exposed to the nerve agent. And they just cannot allow this sort of thing to happen.
It's quite remarkable, Ed, when you think about what the Russians have done, acting with impunity and basically targeting, somebody on British soil, regardless of whatever the British government might think about this. We're going to show, if we can, some of the options that the British government has here. And there are drawbacks to each and every one of these. Expelling Russian spies is on the list, going after Russian billionaires as well, trying to appeal to NATO, and the list goes on and on. What do you think the Russian reaction to all of this is going to be, Ed? Realistically, I mean, do they care what the British do?
Oh, I think they do from a propaganda standpoint. So, as you said earlier, they will engage in tit for tat. You're going to kick out 23 of the people from our country who have diplomatic cover. We're going to do the same thing to you. Putin has also threatened to ban British media from Russia. And this is where I think it's important for the British to have the support of the United States, France, Germany, and other key allies to say that if imagine for a moment if everyone acted in concert and everyone booted out 24 Russians, everyone started to cut off the money flow. And that's really how you can go after Putin. Affect the flow of funds through the international banking system that is used by his cronies. So you've got the owner of Chelsea Football Club, who is a Russian national. You've got one of the majority stakeholders, I think he's got 30% of Arsenal Football Club, another Russian national, ties to the Putin regime. If suddenly these people start to get squeezed, Putin's going to pay attention.
Ed, one final thing. We know the British have asked for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council in New York that's supposed to happen at any moment now. Is it possible that, in light of what the Russians did in Crimea, the sanctions that were brought against them, that the British will be able to get some of their European and North American allies on board to try to squeeze sort of a full court press on the part of the West to squeeze Russia?
Yes, here's the problem with the United Nations. Russia is one of the P5. It has a veto over any Security Council action. So whatever actions would happen at the UN are largely superficial. They're ceremonial. I think the key is through bilateral relations to reach out to allies. And as you suggest, get those countries to come together in meaningful action. But for that to happen, it'll have to be outside the UN because the Russians have that veto.
Ed, wonderful to have you with us. I know it's busy, but thank you for taking the time
Thanks,
to talk to us here on CTV today.
Cheers.